Peter, in the early 90s, invited Stephen Irvin and me to give workshops here, and we did it for 3 or 4 years with not only very interesting results, but they were very useful because they convinced me that you could do a very complicated design in 3 days. That's not a joke, because at the end of my talk, I'm going to show you 6 of them all around the world that actually were done in 3 days. My talk is going to be fast, and it's going to show a lot of slides. It's going to be in English. And I'm really talking to the faculty more than to the students. And the reason for that is that I think that there's a big change occurring in academia. And Switzerland and Germany will be the last countries to engage in it because they're committed to detail and specialization. The other countries have to act fast and strategically, and the details aren't that important. And I'm interested in how do you design politically complicated and large environmental problems where you don't know anything, the conditions are uncertain, and you're not sure how people will behave. And I'm especially interested in how do you begin that process. And when you don't have the specialists, and you don't have the data, and the technology is not there necessarily, I think those are the really important questions. And Germany and Switzerland and parts of America, they're the odd ones, not the normal ones. And you're teaching teachers, you're teaching students who may work anywhere in the world, and they better be prepared for dealing with uncertainty rather than certainty. And I'm really interested in how you work that way. I'm going to read some things from a book. Increased Environmental and Social Risk, which is coming. Ubiquitous Information Technology, which is coming. And demands for democracy and public participation will increasingly influence the education and practice of the design professions and the geographically oriented sciences, and the ways in which their activities towards influencing environmental and social change are organized and carried out. It is clear that for serious societal and environmental issues, designing for change cannot be a solitary activity. In other words, none of us, even me, knows everything. It has to be collaborative. Rather, it's inevitably a collaborative endeavor with participants from various design professions: architecture, landscape architecture, planning, civil engineering, law. Law is a design profession. And geographic sciences, ecology, hydrology, economics, sociology. Sciences that are sciences, geography, in which space and time are variables of interest. Linked by technology, maybe computing, probably computing, but not necessarily, from several locations for rapid communication and feedback, and reliant on transparent communication with the people of the place who are also direct participants, not the clients, direct participants. My lecture is color-coded. If you see, your colors are different than my colors. If you see yellow, you're in the design professions. If you see blue, you're in the geographic sciences. If you see green, you're in the information technologies. And if you see violet, lilac, you're in the people of the place. Now, most people are in one of these. But some people are in 2, and some people are in 3, and very few are in 4. All right? And I'm really interested in the people who are in 3 and 4, the generalists. In every university, I've been in 150 universities, I really have. Almost all of them are focused on one color, and they don't produce the people in the middle who can talk across all of them. It's very interesting, and it's a serious issue, and it's a crisis. The people don't exist who can lead teams of other people who don't speak the same language that they do. And it's absolutely essential. Geodesign applies systems thinking, not creative inspiration, but systems thinking, sometimes creative inspiration, to the creation of proposals for change and impact simulations in their geographic contexts, usually, but not always, supported by digital technology. This is Tess's version of my version of Stephen Irvin's version of Michael Flaxman's definition. Its aim is to change geography by design. By design, design is both a noun and a verb. This is a design, and it was designed by design, by intentional change, the verb design. Geodesign is an invented word. It was invented in the 1990s by 3 people who did not know each other. It was used in publications in the 1990s. I didn't invent it. And it's a very useful term to describe a collaborative activity that is not, I repeat, not, the exclusive territory of any design profession, geographic science, or information technology. It doesn't belong to GIS. It doesn't belong to landscape planning. It certainly doesn't belong to Esri. Each participant must know and be able to contribute something that the others cannot or do not, yet during the process, no one need lose his or her professional, scientific, or personal identity. There's no such person as a geodesigner, and there's no such noun as a geodesign. You're a hydrologist working with an economist, working with an architect on a plan for something. That's what you're doing. The process may be called geodesign. The product and the person can't, in my opinion. People disagree with me on that. Now, here's a real problem. Size and scale matter. Galileo, 17th century, in Latin, said, "Many devices which succeed on a small scale do not work on a large scale." Now, every design has allocation, organization, and expression. Allocation implies how many do we have and where do they go? How many houses do we need and where do they go, for example? Organization means how do the pieces fit together? Is the house near the school, near the shop, near the road, near the railroad station? And expression means what does it look like, smell like, feel like? Are people happy or satisfied or unhappy? Is it ugly? Who knows? Move forward. Now, the geographic sciences in their education start with global truths. You generally start your education learning general principles that are presumed to be true, whether it's in physics or in ecology. It recognizes scientific complexity. It recognizes in its actions in the real world centralized decisions. The scale of working at design at this scale means you have to deal with water systems, providing water to Iraq, building a new train system in Japan, building things that are centralized decisions. It's not local decisions, it's national, international decisions. When people make plans up at this scale, they typically analyze the supply, what they have, and they're typically defensive. The word sustainability means protect what we have. And it comes from working at this scale. The geographic sciences are specialized. They begin to work with other sciences. They work with information technologies. They're big data oriented. Designers are small data oriented. Scientists are big data oriented. And they tend to focus on organization, on allocation first and organization second. And as they get smaller and smaller in the questions that are asked of them, they get worse and worse. They just get worse and worse. Ask the people who do outer space studies and ask them how to change the stream bed in Rapperswil. They wouldn't know what to talk about. It's just a different way of thinking. Now, the design professions have the inverse problem. Instead of starting at global truths, we start our education with small projects and get bigger. And our projects typically have high public understanding. They're not considered scientifically complicated. A house, a garden, a school, a park, a stream restoration, they're complicated, but they're not really that complicated. We tend to emphasize decentralization. My house is not the same as your house, my garden is not the same as your garden, nor should they be. We tend to be demand-based, not supply-based. The client wants a hotel, give him a hotel. And we tend to have offensive strategies, meaning we value innovation, change, and being different. And we sometimes work with other design professions and sometimes with the people in the place. We generally don't question the allocation. We focus on organization and expression, and we put much too much emphasis on expression. The problem is that these people are not really good at the areas which are really important, and these people aren't really good at the areas that are important. I mean, who cares what your house and garden is like except you? And the nations of the world, the politicians of the world, haven't figured out, as the scientists have, what's going to happen in the next generation. And some countries, and some parts of countries, and some places understand that they can actually change these things. And that's where I think collaboration in geodesign can be most significant. And that's with, and I'm going to go back, that's with full respect to the people who do this and full respect to the people who do this. But I can tell you that the people who do this and only this aren't going to change the world for the better. They're going to change private people's houses and gardens for the better. And I think that's too bad, because the real issue is here. Collaboration is not easy. Norbert Wiener wrote an extremely important book in 1948 called Cybernetics. Norbert Wiener was a professor of physics, mathematics, and engineering at MIT in the 1940s and 50s. And he had experience with the communications problems of the people who had to act on the basis of radar in the Second World War. Radar had been invented, the German airplanes were going over England, and too much information was coming that the people who had to send up the Spitfires to defend Germany, to defend England against Germany, couldn't understand the information coming. And there was a mismatch between the information and the need for information. And he wrote a book basically about collaboration under a series of stress conditions. And he basically wrote that collaboration, meaning I have to work with you, we have to work together, requires two things. It requires a framework for collaboration, a set of rules by which you know what I'm sending you and I know what I'm supposed to give you. And when, and how, and under what circumstances, and in what language. And he said it has to have a basis for communication, which has three components. A shared knowledge of the subject, shared assumptions, excuse me. I hate these machines. Shared knowledge of the subject, shared assumptions, and a shared language. And this book became the basis for, in the 80s, Marshall McLuhan dealing with media and how media transmit information from one group to another. And we have the problem, oh, come on, go back. We have the problem. These are the people of the place. That's the media people, the IT people in some sense. That's the designer or designers. That's the IT people. Those are the scientists. They're sending a message called help through a medium, maybe personal, to us as receivers who have an impression gaining a meaning. Then we have to talk to each other, which is not easy. And then we have to send our message back to these people because they're going to decide what to do and they have to act. And that requires a whole set of rules, a whole set of languages. And the question is, which language, among other things? Now, put in simplest words, the first of these, a framework. Put in simplest terms, a theory explains, a model predicts, and a framework organizes. A framework can be judged on its reasonableness and its utility, but it claims no exclusivity vis-a-vis other frameworks. That's Amos Rappaport, a great, great teacher at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. I have a collection of frameworks. Mine is not the only one. I have 7 of them. I think mine is good. It's being used by other people in many places. And if it's useful, good. If it's not, get another one. But without one, you can't collaborate. Because I'm not going to wait for your inspiration. And when you have it, I'm not going to believe it. And you're not going to wait for mine. And if we both have inspiration, what then? Okay? Every design requires the answers to 6 questions. The word context could be a hectare of your garden, a quarter of a hectare probably in Switzerland, or it could be Lake Zurich, or it could be all of Switzerland. I don't care. The word context is, what are you doing? And the questions are, how should the context, I could use the word landscape. How should the landscape be described? How does it work? How does it operate? Is it working well? How might it be changed? What differences might the changes cause? And how should it be changed? With the exception of the last question, it's a basic simulation model structure. Each of these questions is answered by a model. How should it be described? These are representation models. These are basically maps, numbers, data, poems, paintings, stories. They are representations of the real world. They're abstractions from the real world. That's why they're called representation models. They're not called data, but they are data. How does it work? These are process models. Processes are the systems that you've considered to be important in the problem that you're facing. Is the current context working well? These are evaluation models. How might it be changed? These are change models. What difference might the changes cause? These are impact models. And what should be done? These are decision models. The first and the fourth are data. And they have to be in the same language. Repton showed us that. Repton would say, here's a picture of the landscape before, and then there's a flap, and here's the picture of the landscape after. And it takes 2 drawings to show a design, not 1. It takes 2 maps to show a plan or a design, not 1. Because when you show me your drawing, I don't know what was there before. It takes 2. The second question and the fifth question are knowledge. They're not data. How does it work is not data. It's your knowledge of the data, depending on the data that you have. And they have to be in the same language. If I don't know how the water system works, I can't possibly tell you the water impacts of your design. In order to know the water impacts of your design, I need to know how it works. And the third and the sixth question are values, and they're not universal. They're very local. They could be religious, they could be cultural, they could be personal. Depends on the problem, depends on the scale of the problem. And it's really difficult because at the scale that I'm working at usually, the values are in conflict. The entire issue about geodesign, with due respect to our IT colleagues, is that it is not data-driven, it's decision-driven. I need to know something more important than any other question, and that is, how will I know if I have a good design? If I don't know how to make that judgment, I can't possibly begin my work. I may be wrong, I may change my mind, other people may decide it for me, but that's the number one question, and it's driving the system of geodesign. The first 3 questions are assessment, normally of the past and present. And the second 3 questions are related to intervention. That's why the languages are the same. From a social perspective, you have to ask these questions at least 3 times in any design. The first is why, and the aim is to understand the context. Usually you ask them in this way. Second is how. How are we going to work together? Usually you ask them this way. And finally you're going to perform the study, what, where, and when, this way. And from a social perspective, it works like this. These are the people. And they want input into the design. They know what the problems are. And your problem is to find out what they know. And they're going to say, yes, put together a team and study us. Tell us what you think, advise us, but don't presume to decide. We're going to decide in the end. And that's a team of people that you've put together, and you have to get together, and you have to say, why are we here? And so let's go to Rapperswil. It's a nice city. It's going to double in size. People like it. It's going to double in size because Zurich is doubling in size. What it's going to do, it's going to make it uglier possibly. I don't know. And we have to do something about it. Now, how are we going to work together? So we have to decide, how are they going to decide what to do? What impacts do they need? What kind of changes are we thinking about? What's going on now in those systems? Which systems do we need to study? What data do we need to study that process? And it's only here that you know what data you need. And I'm interested in the smallest amount of data needed rather than the largest amount of data. I want the least data, not the most data, but I want to use every single piece of it rather than not use most of it. And finally, we're going to do our study. And at the end of our study, we think we're doing well. There are three things that can happen. The first thing that can happen is, no, it's not good enough. We can't show it yet. And this is very, very important because it's the major advantage of digital technology, and that is rapid feedback. And it may be that we need better data, better models, reevaluation, redesign. We make our students do this a lot until the semester is finished. But maybe the issue is up here. Maybe it's mitigation. Accept the idea that you've got a problem and do something later. And maybe you can educate your decision makers, but it's rare. Or maybe you have to change scale. And changing scale means not just getting detailed. It might be stepping back to the larger region and seeing how that's influencing you, or it could be in greater detail. And what you're going to do is you're going to ask the exact same questions, but the models will change. Don't presume that at one scale the models stay the same when you work at another scale. They don't stay the same. And eventually, you reintegrate at the scale, you bring it back, and you say, yes, we're ready to present it to these people. And you have to make some kind of a presentation. And they have three choices. They can say, no, go away, we never want to see you again, which happens more often than not. Or they can say, that was really interesting what you showed us, but let's see what happens if we change some of our assumptions, because your exercise let us know what we really wanted. And let's do it again under different circumstances. Or they can say, yes, wonderful, we buy it, let's implement it. And something will go wrong. And the reason it'll go wrong is because you're thinking 20 years ahead, and it's not easy to think 20 years ahead. So you have to build in redundancy, and you have to build in the capacity to internally change what you're doing. And it's never linear. I'm presenting it linearly, but the reality is it's not linear. It's messy. Design is messy by definition. No one can be linear in a design process. Never. Not ever, ever. And you better recognize that. Take advantage of it. The advantage of a framework is if you make a mistake, you know where you are. And you can correct it. The advantage, furthermore, in a collaboration is you never know where the ideas come from. But you have to be able to judge if it's a good idea. And I'm especially interested in these people, the coordinator, the person who can speak to them, to them, to them, to them, to them. I'm not interested in just producing that person. That's not where I am, not anymore. So, collaboration has a framework. Mine is one of a collection of them, okay? But what about the communication? What about the basis of communication? This is especially important when you're deciding in the second iteration, in the how questions, how are we going to design the changes that we study or propose? How are we going to do that? We're not going to wait for you. We're not going to wait for you. We have to figure out how to do this. This is a generalizable template. It doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot of the time. Here we are in the present. That's us now. Consider it a map of Rapperswil. And we're going to try to move ahead. That means move ahead, but I'm not sure how long, to the future. Let's say 20 years. So we're trying to get from here to here, from the present to the future. And every place that I've ever worked or studied or been has a past. And it has a history of not only growing, but a history of designs, a history of plans. And they're important because the people who did them weren't stupid. They were thinking ahead also. So you have a history of plans, and you have representation models. You may call them data if you wish. You have processes, which are systems, and you have evaluations, and those can be maps, but they don't have to be maps. They could be oral legends, they could be oral discussions, they could be anything. They're typically maps, however. And you have constants. Constants are things that are going to happen during the lifetime of your design. If there's a new super fast train going to go through Rapperswil, we better know about it right now and incorporate it into our designs, because we're not going to make it go away. And this part is assessment. This part we know we can do right now. But now we're dealing with intervention. And the intervention has requirements. We need 5,000 houses, a school, a shopping center, a hospital, a sewer system, a water system, and a park system, let's say. And they're not equally important. Some are more important than others. Maybe because they cost more, maybe because they're more important for public health or happiness or whatever. They're not equal. So I'm prepared to say that's the most important, second most important, third, to the end. And furthermore, there are lots of ways to solve number one, number two. There are lots of options. There are lots of possible ways of getting it better. The elements of the design. There are lots of them. And so you have a terribly complicated maze. To understand the present, we have to have a shared knowledge of the subject. To understand the requirements, we have to have shared assumptions. And to understand what the ideas are that we have to link together to make the design, we have to have a shared language. And there are lots of ways to get through this maze. And I'm going to point out that it is a maze. Think about this. Supposing that there were 3 of those, 5 of those, 4 of those, that's 3 times 5 is 15, times 4 is 60, times 4 is 320, times 4 is 640. There are 640 possible designs in that diagram. And that assumes only one choice is being made, but I could actually take that and that and that. So there's about 2 billion design possibilities, and the likelihood of your having a good one is small because the project is complicated. So you need a strategy of how do you get through the maze. And it is a maze. Right? I'm not waiting for your concept and working backwards, although I'll show you some examples. So there are lots of ways of getting through this. In fact, there are 8 of them that I've written about. And then the necessary thing is that there are mixed ones. You could begin here, go there, and go back to there. So it's a complicated little thing. Now, they fall into 3 groups. Let me go to the next slide, and then I'm going to go back. They fall into 3 groups. There are three circumstances. The first group, which I'm going to illustrate each one of these in a short example in landscape planning. Anticipatory, participatory, sequential. These are the things you do around here. Sorry. I'm sorry. Go back. My thumb is bigger than these little things. These are the things you do here. These 3 methods, the first 3, are when you're confident in what you're doing. You know what you're doing. It's the stuff of old men and women who have experience. They know what they're doing. They don't go thinking basics. It's not basics. The second 2, these 2, are really good up here where you know you have uncertainty. In other words, you don't know what you're doing. You know that you don't know what you're doing, but you still have to do something. And the last 3 are really good around here, where you know what the rules are, but you don't know where they're leading you. Okay? I'm going to come back to this question, because one of the interesting things is that the language of design is different as a function of size. Or you can begin with this, which leads you to a similar but slightly different design. Or you could lead with the same thing, change the second one, and it'll lead you to a slightly different design. And when you begin small, you believe that this way of designing, which is what all of you are taught, and me too, will carry you to be able to design that. And that's patently not true. Okay? Not true. You can't. You haven't a chance. So if you're here, the question I have is how far this way you're going to get. Or you're going to do this and be very happy. Out here, you're using rule and mathematical models. And you can produce a design. We've done designs with optimizing models and with agent-based models. We've done them. We've made them. I'll show you some. But the really useful one is working with diagrams, with system-based diagrams, and combining diagrams to make the design. And you can always change it. You can always change it. And diagrams are really, really important. Diagrams at the scale we're working at are very important, because I can work with almost anybody with a pencil and paper and exchange diagrams, and we'll understand each other. I don't understand the numbers and I don't understand the words, but I can understand the diagrams. And so I'm really interested in designing with diagrams. And you'll see several examples. All right, the first method is when you know what you're doing, and it's the stuff of old people. You're here, and in the middle of the night, you see the future. I do it frequently. I keep pencil and paper next to my bed, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'll make a little diagram, and that's the future. I've had the experience many times. And then the problem is, you have to go back to the present and figure out how to get there, and you almost get there almost always, but never quite exactly the same. Right? That is really common, and it's very common on small projects. You see the future, maybe on site, maybe in the middle of the night, and you then have to figure out how to make it work. That's fine. So now let me go back to this diagram. This is Ebenezer Howard's Garden Cities, 1908. Every planning student in the world has studied Ebenezer Howard and Raymond Onion's Garden Cities. All right, I had to design 6 examples for a study of the growth of Los Angeles between Los Angeles and San Diego, the largest open space that's a military base, Camp Pendleton, California. And I had 20 minutes to design it. So I went to my memory, I dug out that, I designed that sketch. I did it in 20 minutes as part of the Camp Pendleton project, 1996, a very famous project. Then we did this for this city. Then we did this using GIS and all kinds of analysis. Then we did this. But the original idea came in 20 minutes. Why? Because I had the diagram in my head, and I could draw it, and other people could then develop it. That's it. That's the method. Don't use this on things that are really important. The second method is participatory. It means, here we are, we're a committee. You have a design, you have a design, you have one, you have one, you have one, and it's participatory. Everybody has a design. We know what Rapperswil should be. So let's get in a meeting, let's put everybody together and let them all design. And so here we are. There's my 5, 6 designs. They're all different. They are all different. And you have the problem of how do you make one design out of 6? And then you have the same problem as the first scheme. You have to get to the present and put together the ideas and the policies that make it work, and you almost always get there, but not quite. This is the doctoral research of Juan Carlos Vargas Moreno, one of my students. He's Costa Rican. He's working on the Osa Peninsula, which is the highest biodiversity in North America. It's the Osa Peninsula of Costa Rica. He had a Wacom tablet with a very high-level GIS, and he went to fishermen, farmers, NGOs, and the Minister of Environment of Costa Rica. And he had 42 people representing all kinds of political interests and asked each one to design a design for the future 20 years of this area. And he had 42 designs. He then analyzed political agreement among the designs by simply figuring out ways to test whether they were similar to each other. In other words, it's spatial statistics. It's spatial similarity among a set. Right? Your design is different from his, but it's close to his. Why? Because your color red is where his color red is. Right? Your color green is where his color green is. But he's got yellow where you've got green. So he's not like you. So what he did was he started taking these 42 designs and he said, let's start grouping them by spatial similarity. And what he found was, and then he went back and asked people, when we grouped your two designs, do you feel happy? Do you feel happy? And at some point when we grouped 20 people's designs, you no longer feel that you're being represented. And you might walk out, which you probably would. And what he did was he said, you know, there's a line, green is agreement and red is disagreement. There's a line here which is really important, where almost all people agree, and then eventually they don't agree. Because the people in San Jose, the capital, have different interests than the local people. They have different priorities. And so he said, we're not going to solve this problem, but we can solve part of the problem. So he made one plan representing the local people consensus and another plan representing the national interest consensus. And he said, let's combine those two. And if it's colored here, it means we have agreement. But if it's gray, it means we don't have agreement. And he said, let's build the agreement and let's leave the gray to the next generation. That's a totally rational design and a very sensible approach and a very clever approach. And it took him 2 years to do his thesis, but it took him a couple of weeks to do the 42 designs, and it took him a couple of weeks to do the analysis. It was very clever. Sequential is yet different. Sequential means you know what you're doing. You've built 100 school sports facilities. You know exactly what you're doing. Leave me alone. It has to do this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Just don't bother me. Or you're told what to do. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. You must do it. And so there's not much to do. You say, okay, that's the problem. Do this, 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 and finished. There's no agony. This is a very important project. This is the garbage dump of Bermuda. Bermuda is an island, and the first black man was elected prime minister in 1982, and his finance minister walks into my office and says, would you bring your students to Bermuda to design a new park because I want to close the dump? Of course, how could you say no? And this is what we did. This is a very, very important case. We talked to people, and the headline in the local paper is dump study team talks to listens to the people. Nobody had ever listened to the people before. And I told my students, whenever you get an idea from the people, make a diagram. And they had about 80 diagrams. And then we said, these 5 have to be in every design. And that's the number 1 issue, number 2, 3, 4. And we said, this is our understanding. These are the most important things. And then we put the 5 solutions related to that in order. So that's the best solution, second, third, fourth, fifth best solution for that problem. Okay? So this is a rank-ordered set of diagrams. And the upper left-hand corner is the most important. So far, you got me? And then I had 14 students, and I had a lottery. And he won. And I said, well, Peter, you have the right to pick a set of diagrams. And you're being smart. You said, I want the top red ones. So that's Peter. And you got second place. And you can pick any set except his. And so you had to pick another one, and you picked blue. And he picked green. So I had 15 students, each having been given a diagram set, and said, make a design and make it in 2 weeks. And then we set up a factory to make materials, and at the 4th week, we had 15 designs, and they were all designed to be broken and put into a box. Have Everybody used the same. I don't value people's skill at making drawings because I want to know what they're doing, and I have to be able to compare. So if somebody says in my studio, what a good drawing, it means they have nothing else to say. Okay? So 15 boxes with 3 students went to Bermuda in the days when you could fly with unlimited baggage. And they showed 15 designs, and the people of Bermuda said, we don't like them except for 3. We like 3 of them. So every student whose design was thrown out had to join another student whose design was still in. And so now we had 3 teams of about 5 students each. And they produced 3 designs. And then these 3 designs, with the whole class in January in Bermuda, presented it to 10,000 people, to 10% of the population of the country. And the Prime Minister, being very wise, said, I'm going to put it as a referendum. What should we do? And they picked this one. And that one was this set of diagrams. That was very important, because it meant that if you could prepare the diagrams in order of what you thought was the decision model, you had a really good chance of making a design that was pretty good, pretty fast. That was very important. Now, decision models, I want to speak about them because we're now moving to a different way of thinking. Decision models are the relative importance of many factors that make you decide whether you've got a good design. Cost, beauty, public health, legality, you name them. You name all the good things that you have to judge when making a complex design. And there's all kinds of theory about hedonic pricing and about other ways of making decisions. But basically what happens is if you ask people in a Delphi method or in some other organized method, you'll get one of 2 patterns. One of 2 patterns. And these patterns influence the way that you should be designing. The most common is what's called a Zipf distribution. Zipf was a linguist, and he studied the frequency of the use of words. And if you have any geographic background, you know what a Zipf distribution is. It's this. That's the number 1 factor, and that's 2/3, and that's 2/3 of that, and that's 2/3 of that, and that's 2/3 of that, and it becomes a line that looks like that. Okay? But 1 is dominant, and it's more important than 2. The other kind of thing is this kind of pattern, where two maybe, or 3 things are really important and the rest are unimportant. It has to be legal, it has to make money, and it has to make people happy. And the rest is unimportant. All right? So the constraining method is based on the Zipf distribution. If your decision model looks like this is how you should probably make your first design. You ought to study those options really, really carefully. Don't start with this one. Don't start here. Start number 1, and then make your decision. That's the best solution. And then go to the second one, and study it really, really carefully in relation to this one. And that's your decision. And by the way, there may be more than one decision. Then study the third. Make your decision in regard to those 2. And then keep going. Okay? And eventually you'll get a design. This is with Hanover University. This is with Christina van Haren and her students in Cagliari. And what we're doing is we're looking at the growth of Cagliari, the capital of Sardinia, over the next 20 years, in conjunction with the University of Cagliari's architecture, urban design, and planning students. That's the city. That's the students making diagrams based on different systems. Those are numbered in order of priority. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're diagrams that are color-coded. They're drawn in permanent marker on plastic. And there are 10 different sets of diagrams. They're laid out on a table so that at noon on the first day, we have 100 ideas about how to improve the systems that we're working on. Then each of 6 design teams can pick up the diagrams, put them on a light table, photograph them, and put them back for the next team. They digitize what they want to do. We ended up having 6 designs at the end of the first day. we evaluated them as being very much better, no change, worse, very much worse, and the dead process. It's a model, but it's in the team's heads. It's not a GIS model, it's in their heads, it's in their experience. And we iterated, we made a second one, and we made a third one. And at the end of the day, we had iterated to a third design, at the end of the second day. At noon on the third day, we had a presentation. So we had a design, and we had each of the policies, diagrams, and plans that went into that. There were about 20 pieces of plastic, themed by 10 different themes, of which they only used in this team 8. That's their design. And then we had a presentation on the third day. And 7 people who were serious planners of the region of Sardinia did not agree on which was the best design. There were the 6 designs. And then I said to Juan Carlos, the same student who's doctoral student who did the public participation, I said, Juan Carlos, we have on the computer all of the elements that are in these designs. Let's look at the ones that are used the most. Let's look at the diagrams that are used by all of the designs, because they may be good ideas, because each design was based on a different political client. So that's been used, I don't know if you can see it, but that's been used by all 6, that group was used by all 6 designs. That by 6, that by 5, that by 5, that by 4, that by 4. So let's make a new design by simply calling up the GIS layers that are in these diagrams, and we made a 7th design. And we did it live and in person. It took a half an hour. And everybody thought, that's a pretty good design. Why? Because they used diagrams of ideas regardless of whose interest it was. And they could build a political coalition around it. This is the combinatorial one. The combinatorial one is very difficult. It's very hard to do without computing, because you have to look at all the combinations before you decide what to do. If those are equally important, these are equally important, 1, 2, and 3. Before you pick that one, you'd better study all the other combinations. And there are a lot of those combinations. So again, if this is the system, the chances of one human being figuring out which the best one is 0. You can be close, but that's about it. And you'll be lucky if you are. Then you can continue. This is Tepoztlán. This is a city in Mexico, a very important city. It was the headquarters of the Franciscans. When the Spanish conquered Mexico, the Franciscans had their headquarters here in that church. And it's a very important place. It's at the edge of Mexico City, and it still has a sierra. It still has landscape. But the pressure in Mexico City is enormous. This is the city. The growth projection is like that. It's unbelievable. They have a plan, and look at the plan. It's continuous urbanization in the valley. And this is what the market will do. The plan won't last. This is the pressure of that amount of development on that city is urbanizing the whole thing. We took this is jointly done with Mexico City University. We took the students with my Mexican colleagues and the Mexican students, and we spent a week. And anytime anybody got an idea, it was given a number, the name of the person who did it, whether it was a policy or a project, and what it was useful for. And we had 200 some odd projects, and they were linked to a spreadsheet. Now, watch this. Project 55 is to keep the drainages from the mountain, which separates little villages, from being built. Normal landscape planning. Don't build the drainage. The master plan builds the drainage. The market builds the drainage. They'll put it into a culvert, into a pipe. And we said, no, don't do that. That's Project 55. And then we had a whole bunch of exercises. One student had to build an environmental scenario. So he picked, he picked projects, 1, 2, 11, 13, 46, 55, 100, 151. And it was combined automatically by computer. And another group did a tourism scenario. They did not pick 55. And another one did an economic scenario. They did not pick 55. This took a day, one day. One day. And then we did a combined scenario, which did include Project 55. There's Project 55. And then we grew the city, and there's Project 55. And then we evaluated them iteratively. And then we did a visual management plan, and we did a detailed plan of the center, and then we did a landscape plan of the center, and then we did a housing museum, a museum of the art of the city, and then we did a whole series of things. It doesn't matter. What was really important in one semester was that we could get the basic strategy of the design in the first 2 weeks. We weren't waiting. And we did it by simply making diagrams, giving a bunch of exercises. You do it in an hour, and there it is. And then we talked about it and made our decisions. Those two are really useful techniques, in my opinion. The third one is rule-based, and our colleagues in Zurich are very good at rule-based design. We've all done rule-based design, probably. In a rule-based design, each requirement has a set of rules. That has a set of rules. They're different. This is the housing rules, the the shopping rules, the road rules, the train rules. And you could write a computer program that does the design. And this is the growth of La Paz, which is the capital of Baja California Sur in Mexico. The thing about a rule-based approach is that it allows easy sensitivity analysis. If you don't know what the rules really are, try 2 different versions. That's really useful. The bigger the project and the more the uncertainty, a rule-based system is really, really good because it allows you to change your mind. But you still have to know what the rules are, and we don't necessarily know the rules. This is a group of 15 computer models, and it basically generates the future designs based upon the rules and the assumptions. Those are alternative futures. We made 16 of them under different sets of assumptions. Don't deal with the details. Just recognize that there's a set of rules built into a set of computer models based on a GIS which does the design for you. The design in this case is a plan for doubling the population of a city. And then you can compare the designs. You can compare them environmentally and economically. And the answer is somewhere in here. That's the best economic, that's the best environmental, that's the best where they're equal. And the answer is somewhere in here. But it's not the set of assumptions that are there. That's a published study. It's on the internet. You can look it up. The 7th method is one that we have done once. And that's building a set of computer models that optimize the design. The question is, what do you mean by optimum? And the answer is, let's make the most money. Okay? So we had access to a huge real estate database, and we knew the price of land, and we knew what people were willing to pay. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at Telluride, Colorado, which is a rich person's ski place. It's like looking at Davos. And nobody lives in Davos except people 2 weeks a year. The workers don't live in Davos. They can't afford it. They have to go somewhere else. And what's happening here is the rich people are coming and they're pushing the poorer people who work there and make it possible for them to live there away. And we want to know where they're going. And we have a set of optimizing computer programs that basically say, given a set of assumptions, the marketplace will solve the problem to make the most money for the developers, including the developers of housing for poorer people. The American way. And so we know where the rich people are going to go, and we know where the poor people are going to be forced. The poor people are going to go out, and this is the town. And the poor people of different classes are going to go out here, because it's cheaper, and that's the town right there. And the rich people are going to go there, but they're not allowed to go there. It's National Register. It's a protected town. They're going to go here. That, by the way, is a design, an automated design. No human being, except writing the rules, designed it. The design designs the location with the view, the access to the skiing, and the road. I'm sure that's been done in Switzerland, but I haven't seen it. But we have. And finally, this one, which I think is really interesting, an agent-based model. In an agent-based model, every person is an agent, or every house is an agent. And they each want to find their location. In other words, you don't make a rule that says all houses follow the same rule. And you don't make a design that says all houses must be here. It doesn't work that way. Everybody wants a piece of land where they can build a house, etc. And it's a competitive market of agents. And this is Mike Flaxman's doctoral thesis. And he's dealing with two simultaneous agents. One is, does the person who owns a piece of land in a fire-prone California forest, fire-prone California forest, maintain the landscape around his house so that it doesn't burn? Does he have a wooden roof? Does he have trees next to his house which burn? Or does he use xeriscape and keep the landscape away? And the second is the fire. The fire is an agent model. A hectare of fire goes this way if the wind blows this way, it goes this way if the wind blows this way, it goes that way if the fuel is there, it goes that way if the fuel is there. It behaves like an agent. Each hectare moving in the landscape is a function of the landscape and the wind. And he combined these two into a series of models in which he took different management plans for this town, and he ran different kinds of fire across them, and given what the people do to these houses, he can tell you under different fire conditions whether they're going to burn or not. That's really useful. What's the design? The design is whether you keep the trees away from your house. That's the design. It's a management design. It's a maintenance design. And this is the last one I'm going to show you, but then I'll show you something else. This is a study by Mike Batty at CASA, at the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis, with Kirill Stenerov. This is the history of West London. The history of West London. And what he's done is he's taken West London, and every 20 years he's updated the database and seen how it grows. Now, London has excellent data. Every house and every tree. 1875, 1895, 1915, 1935, every 20 years. And that's the actual land use. The actual land use of the growth of West London. And these are the infrastructure that was built. The new railroads, the new roads, and the airport, Heathrow Airport. And he studied the relationship between infrastructure and development, and he built a model. That's a model. And what's remarkable is that it's an agent-based model, where each property and whether it develops is treated separately. Right? It's not a master plan. It's whether your piece of land will be changed, whether your piece of land will be changed, whether his piece of land will be changed. And that's the modeled, predicted future. And what's interesting is how similar it is to what the actual, that's actual, and that's predicted, based upon these infrastructure changes. And let's look at it in detail. That's 2005 real industry, and that's 2005 modeled industry. That's 2005 commerce. That's 2005 modeled commerce. Now, 2 years ago, we made a design, a physical design, using agent-based models. It was very interesting. So here we have different ways of designing. They're all ways of designing. They're all ways of getting through this maze. Some of them are better here, some are better here, some are better here. Some are sketching, some are system-based diagrams, some are rule-based and mathematical models. It still leaves the question. It still leaves the question. Given your problem, which one are you going to use? I want to show you at the end an experiment. Many devices which succeed on a small scale do not work on a large scale. This was a hypothesis, my hypothesis. My hypothesis was that as projects get larger, I think they get more complicated. You might argue there's nothing more complicated than the garden. And I really felt that simpler methods, and these are simpler because you believe that you know what you're doing, are better here, and they do work really, really well. But as you get bigger, you need to recognize that you don't know things. And as you get down here, you need to know what the rules are, but you don't know the future. So I really believe that appropriateness was on an angle, and there are always going to be exceptions. There are always going to be exceptions. And that the method of designing changes as a function of size. I actually believe that's true. And so we ran an experiment, the Redlands experiment. 2 years ago, a group of 50 people, Eric Booman, Tess Canfield, Stephen Irvin, Mike Flaxman, serious people who know what they're doing. A third of the people lived in Redlands, California. A third of them were scientists, a third were designers, and a third were information technologists. And almost everybody had two skills. And this is Redlands, California. This is the home of Esri. And Jack Dangerman paid for this. And we had a system where every design move could be evaluated in real time. We had a pretty good system. If you made a design move, it told you whether you were doing better or worse. One of these kinds of systems is going to be demonstrated Wednesday in Zurich by one of my doctoral students. And we created 9 teams, each led by somebody, Stephen, Tess, Eric. And the problem was the following. They had to design a landscape plan for the city of Redlands and a 3-dimensional transit-oriented development, and they had 3 days to do it. We had all the data and all the models done in advance by the city, and they told us exactly what their decision criteria were. So we had, at the end of 3 days, 9 open space designs for the city. There they are. And we knew, and not only that, we knew how good they were. We knew how good they were, okay? And we had 9 3-dimensional designs, one of which was built by an agent-based model. And we could compare them. And what we found was that depending on scale, the simpler ones got better, and depending on size, the simpler ones were better at the smaller project, and the more complicated ones were better at the bigger project. That's what we found. And so we found that that's hypothesis may be true, but it's only one experiment, and you never build a theory on one experiment. But it may be true. And if it is true, it's really important. I mean, if it really is true, then you'd better start learning how to design with diagrams in this scale, in the constraining and combinatorial and maybe the rule-based system. Because if you only operate anticipatory, waiting for your concept, you're never, ever, ever going to work at this scale. And that may not be what you want to do, but it may be what you ought to do. And you'd better think about that, because it's simply not true that if you can design something small, you can design something large. Thank you.